Hi everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today I have part 2 of the National Rebuild for you, titled Water and Plumbing. There are approximately 144 million homes in America, each home having a plumbing system that can last between 50 and 100 years. That's according to ARS Rescue Router. Some of these homes' plumbing systems could be made out of Orangeburg piping, clay piping, and then PVC piping. So for homes with Orangeburg piping for its plumbing system, that can last between 30 and 50 years. If your home uses clay piping for its plumbing system, that can last between 50 and 60 years. And lastly, if your home uses PVC piping for its plumbing system, that can last up to 100 years. There are 3 million plus homes in the US that are between the age of 91 and 100 years old, and there are 2 million plus homes between the ages of 101 and 110 years old. What this means as it relates to the previous slide, it means that there are potentially 5 plus million homes in America that require total water and sewage line replacement. There's no national average in terms of cost for a home to undergo complete water and sewage line replacement. Neither is there a national standard for how much plumbing is utilized in a home of similar sizes. So, total cost for a home to undergo complete water and sewage line replacement will completely vary drastically on location, size of the home, terrain, etc. So for the smallest home square footage wise, according to Google, that being 350 square feet, for a home that size with cast iron piping, per square foot, it usually costs about $20 all the way up to $75 per square foot. So what I did was, starting at the low end for cast iron piping per square foot, I did $20 times the smallest house size according to Google, which is 350 square feet. And to completely replumb a house with cast iron piping at that square footage, it'll cost $7,000 at $20 per square foot for cast iron piping. Or on the high end for cast iron piping, which is $75, I did that times 350 square feet, giving you a total of $26,250 to completely replumb a home that is 350 square feet with cast iron piping. So below that, I have copper piping for a home that is 350 square feet. I did $30 being the low end times 350 square feet, giving you a total of $10,500 to completely replumb a home of 350 square feet with copper piping. And then on the high end, for $80 per square foot with a home that is 350 square feet, it'll cost you $28,000 to replumb a home that is 350 square feet with all copper piping. Now to speed this up, I'm just going to call off or list off the different remaining plumbing options in terms of piping, so like PEX, PVC, ABS. I'm going to list off what it will cost to completely replumb a home at 350 square feet on the low end and then on the high end for each respective material. So going back to the middle of the list, for PEX at $2 a square foot, it'll cost you $700 on the low end and then $3,500 on the high end to completely replumb a home at 350 square feet. For PVC on the low end at $3 per square foot, it'll cost you $1,050. And then on the high end at $8 per square foot, it'll cost you $2,800 to completely replumb a home that is the size of 350 square feet. And then lastly, for ABS on the low end at $3, it'll cost you $1,050. And then on the high end at $11, it'll cost you $3,800 $350 to completely replumb a home at 350 square feet. Now for the median house size, Google says the median house size in America is 2,200 square feet pretty much. So to completely replumb a house that is 2,200 square feet with cast iron piping, it'll cost on the low end $44,460, and then on the high end it'll cost $166,725 to completely replumb a house of this size with cast iron piping. For copper on the low end, it'll pretty much cost you $66,700. And then on the high end for copper, it'll pretty much cost you $178,000. For PEX on the low end, it'll cost you $4,500 pretty much, and then on the high end, it'll pretty much cost you $22,230. For PVC, it'll cost you on the low end pretty much $6,700. And then on the high end, it'll pretty much cost you $18,000. Moving on to the last one for this slide, for a home that is pretty much 2,200 square feet, for ABS, it'll cost you $7,000 pretty much. My bad, I mean $6,700. And then on the high end, it'll pretty much cost you $24,500. Once again, those were the low end pricing, and then the highest end pricing to completely replumb a house that is pretty much 2,200 square feet with these different material pipes. Largest house. Google says the largest average house in America is 175,926 square feet. So starting on the low end of the spectrum, to completely replumb a house of this size with cast iron plumbing, it'll run you $3.5 million. And then on the high end, it'll cost you $13.1 million. For copper piping, it'll cost on the low end $5.2 million, and then on the high end, it'll cost you pretty much $14 million to completely replumb a house of this size with all copper piping. If using PEX piping, it'll pretty much cost you $352,000 on the low end, and then on the high end, it'll cost you $1.7 million to use PEX. If you were going to use PVC piping, on the low end, it'll run you $528,000, and then on the high end, it'll cost you $1.4 million to completely replumb your home using PVC piping. And then lastly, using ABS piping on the low end, it'll cost you pretty much $528,000. And then on the high end, it'll run you $1.9 million. And that is the low end and high end to completely replumb a house that is, on average, according to Google, 175,926 square feet. Moving on to another section in this PowerPoint, the state and city water and plumbing lines in need of total replacement. The EPA in 2024 found that there is over 9.2 million plus water lines in the United States that still contain lead. First up, Illinois. The Chicago's Bureau of Water Supply estimates that there are still over 387,000 water service lines that contain lead and need replacement. The water company estimates that there are 16,700 water service lines in Chicago that don't contain lead. Adding to the problem though, the city of Chicago estimates that there are over 118,746 service lines, water service lines, of which the city does not know what those pipes are made of, so they don't know if it's made of clay, lead, cast iron, etc. As a state in whole, the state of Illinois has over 679,292 water service lines that still contain lead, or that are made up of lead. Ohio. Cleveland Water estimates that its water supply system still has over 235,442 water service lines that still contain lead and need replacement. Cleveland Water estimates that 228,156 water service lines within the city don't contain lead. For the whole state of Ohio, the whole state of Ohio has 650,000 water service lines that still contain lead. New York. New York City system estimates it still has over 111,616 water service lines within the water supply system that contain lead and require replacement. It estimates that it still has over 414,695 water service lines within the city that doesn't contain lead. The Water Department estimates it still has over 185,979 water service lines within the city's water supply system that it doesn't know what those pipes are made up of. New York State estimates it still has over 360,000 lead service lines within its water supply system as a state in whole. Now for Michigan in the following slides, to save time, I'm just going to read off how many water service lines within the city in each state contains lead, and then how many water service lines within the whole state contains lead. So for Detroit, Michigan, Detroit Water Department estimates that over 79,617 water service lines within the city of Detroit's water supply service system still contain lead and require replacement. For the state of Michigan as a whole, Michigan's total water supply system, they estimate it still has over 460,000 water service lines that contain lead. For Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the Milwaukee Water Works Department estimates that the city of Milwaukee still has over 74,099 water service lines that contain lead pipes and require replacement. And for Wisconsin as a whole, the state estimates that within its whole water supply system, there are still over 329,866 lead pipes within the water supply system that require replacement. Denver, Colorado. The city of Denver's water board estimates that there are still over 63,955 water service lines within the city's water supply system that contain lead pipes and require replacement. For the state as a whole, the state of Colorado estimates that there are over 64,650 water service lines that still contain lead and require replacement. St. Louis, Missouri. St. Louis Water Division estimates that the city's water supply system still has over 60,000 water service lines within the city's water supply that still contain lead piping and require replacement. The state of Missouri as a whole estimates that the whole state of Missouri has over 330,000 water service lines that contain lead and require replacement. Indianapolis, Indiana. Indianapolis Water Group estimates that the city has over 55,060 water service lines within the city's water supply that still contain lead piping and require replacement. Indiana as a state estimates that its whole water supply has over 290,000 pipes within its water supply system that still require replacement. Minneapolis, Minnesota. Minneapolis Water estimates that the city's water supply system still has over 48,502 water service lines within its city's water supply system that require complete replacement. The state of Minnesota estimates that within its whole water supply system there are still over 260,000 water service lines that contain lead and require replacement. Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The city of Fort Lauderdale Water estimates that there are still over 23,278 water service lines within the city's water supply that contain lead and require replacement. The state of Florida as a whole estimates that there are still over 200,000 water service lines within the state that require complete replacement. Atlanta, Georgia. The city estimates that there are still over 61,000 water service lines that contain lead within the city's water supply system and require replacement. The state of Georgia as a whole estimates that there are still over 86,000 water service lines within the state's water supply system that contain lead. So just from these 10 states alone, there are over 3.7 million water service lines that require replacement within the USA. I'd like to thank you all for watching the video and for supporting the channel. Stay tuned for National Rebuild Part 3, Waterways. Thank you all and have a good day.